If you've ever sat at your desk at 2 in the afternoon with a spreadsheet open but processed nothing for 45 minutes because your Slack notifications won't stop multiplying, you already know this isn't a discipline problem. The problem is that the system has convinced you collaboration is the only path to success, while it quietly destroys your ability to do the one thing you were actually hired to do. It is the central contradiction of the modern workplace. You are rewarded for being available, but evaluated on output that requires you to be unavailable. And the evidence, gathered across decades of organizational psychology and hidden in the designs of spaces you work in every day, suggests this contradiction was not an accident, but a predictable consequence of how work was engineered. Let's start with the official story, the one you hear in every onboarding presentation and company-wide email. Collaboration is the engine of innovation. Open offices break down silos. Instant messaging creates transparency. Meetings align strategy. Every single one of these statements contains a seed of truth, but the seed has been allowed to grow into a vine that chokes the plant it was supposed to support. The narrative emerged in the early 20th century, but its modern form crystallized around a single year, 1970. That year, Robert Probst, a designer working for the furniture company Herman Miller, introduced the Action Office system at the company's headquarters in Zeeland, Michigan. Probst was a genuine innovator. He had studied how people actually worked and concluded that rigid rows of desks were killing initiative. The Action Office was meant to give workers flexibility, movable panels, adjustable surfaces, a sense of territory without permanent walls. Probst believed that increasing communication would spark creativity and that the physical environment should support, not constrain, the way people naturally collaborated. What happened next is a case study in how good intentions get corrupted by cost-cutting. The open plan office was cheaper to build than a traditional one. Real estate costs dropped. Headcount per square foot increased. Companies implemented the shell of Probst's vision while abandoning its philosophy. And within a decade, the open office had become the dominant layout for white-collar work across the United States. But here is what nobody told you when that layout was installed on your floor. In 1977, a full 7 years after Probst's Action Office debuted, researchers at the University of Wisconsin published a study that found workers in open-plan offices reported 30% higher levels of distraction and 15% lower perceived productivity compared to their colleagues in private offices. The studies kept coming. They kept saying the same thing, and the offices kept being built the same way. If that pattern sounds familiar, it's because you are living inside it. Understanding why good research keeps losing to bad design is what this channel exists for. Subscribe so you can see the full architecture of the system that shapes your workday. And tell me in the comments, what is the one innovation at your workplace that you suspect is actually making things worse? Be specific. Now, consider what happened next. In 1999, Microsoft Exchange Server 5.5 and Lotus Notes launched as the first enterprise-wide platforms for scheduling meetings across entire organizations. The technology worked. The side effect did not. Within 5 years, corporate meeting volume in the United States had grown by approximately 35%, according to a 2005 Gartner report. The tools designed to coordinate work had metastasized into the work itself. By 2004, a Vancouver-based company called TinySpec had begun developing what would eventually become Slack. When the platform launched publicly in 2014, the chat-first culture it created fundamentally rewired how millions of people experienced their workdays. Slack's own annual report for 2020 showed 12 million daily active users. That is 12 million people whose cognitive workflow is now punctuated by an average of hundreds of interruptions per day, each one small enough to seem harmless, each one carrying an invisible tax. And then the pandemic arrived. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the proportion of workers using video conferencing tools daily jumped from 27% in 2019 to 50% in 2020, a 23% increase driven by survival. Overnight, the always-on collaborative model that had been building for decades became the only model available. Your kitchen table became a meeting room, your calendar became a battleground, and the research that had been warning about this for years suddenly became impossible to ignore. Let's look at what the studies actually found, not the headlines. The numbers. In a 2020 study published in the Journal of Business and Psychology, researcher Steven Rugelberg and his colleagues surveyed 1,214 employees across multiple industries. They found that the average employee spends 31 hours per month in meetings. That is nearly an entire work week every month spent in rooms being spoken at, speaking, or staring at a screen while someone shares their screen. 71% of those employees rated at least one meeting per week as unproductive. And here is where the data gets personal. That perception of unproductive meeting time predicted a 2.5% drop in self-reported task performance. A small number, but applied across a workforce, it amounts to billions of dollars in lost productivity every year. But meetings are only part of the problem. The real damage happens in the spaces between them. In 2021, researchers Jeffrey Lapine and Yajun Zhang published a study in the Academy of Management Journal that examined 3,512 employees across a range of knowledge work industries. They defined something they called collaboration overload, 4 or more collaborative interactions per hour. The findings were stark. Employees who experienced collaboration overload showed a 12% increase in burnout scores on the Maslach Burnout Inventory, the gold standard for measuring professional exhaustion, and a 9% reduction in creative output. This is not a productivity problem. This is a health problem with productivity consequences. Think about what 4 collaborative interactions per hour actually means. A Slack message, a quick question from a colleague passing your desk, a 5-minute stand-up, an email that demands a response. 4 things, in 1 hour, each one pulling your attention away from whatever you were trying to accomplish. Your brain is not designed to switch contexts that quickly. When you are interrupted, your prefrontal cortex must disengage from the current task, orient to the new input, process it, decide whether to act, and then attempt to re-engage with the original task. That process takes, on average, 23 minutes to fully recover from. Not 23 seconds, 23 minutes. So, a 4-second interruption asking where you saved the budget file costs your employer 23 minutes of focused cognitive work. That is the hidden tax nobody budgets for. And then there is Zoom fatigue. The term entered the public lexicon during 2020, but the researchers were already studying it. In a study published in Computers and Human Behavior, Jeremy Bailenson and his colleagues surveyed 2,108 participants and found that 58% reported significant fatigue after 2 or more hours of video meetings per day. Not tired, fatigued. The kind of exhaustion that makes the afternoon impossible to salvage. The study linked this fatigue to measurable changes in how participants processed information. After extended video meetings, creative problem-solving dropped, working memory degraded, the ability to prioritize multiple competing demands collapsed. You have felt this. You know exactly which day this was describing, and that feeling is the exact moment you become part of a truth that most people still ignore. Subscribe to this channel and join a community that refuses to blame itself for a rigged system. We keep uncovering the mechanisms that drain you, and I want to see a pattern in the comments. Drop the time of day your video meetings start to hit that wall. Let's see if the data matches. But here is the strange part, the part that turns this from a complaint into a revelation. The researchers also found that the fatigue scores were linked to a sense of being watched. In a physical meeting, you can glance away, you can take notes, you can lean back in your chair and process what someone is saying without appearing disengaged. On video, you must perform attention every second. The performance of looking interested consumes energy that could otherwise be used for actually being interested. So the official story promised that collaboration would make you more productive, that open offices would break down barriers, that always-on communication would accelerate decisions. And the evidence shows the opposite across every single metric. More meetings correlate with lower performance. More open layouts correlate with higher distraction. More chat messages correlate with higher burnout. More video calls correlate with lower creative output. The system is delivering the opposite of what it promised, and it is delivering it at scale. This is not happening because you are bad at managing your time. It is not happening because you lack discipline. It is happening because the structure of modern knowledge work was engineered for a different purpose than the one it claims to serve. Remember Frederick Winslow Taylor. In 1911, Taylor published The Principles of Scientific Management, the book that became the operating system for the 20th century workplace. Taylor was obsessed with eliminating waste. He stood in factories with a stopwatch, measuring how long it took a worker to pick up a piece of steel, carry it to a lathe, position it, and tighten the clamp. He broke every motion into its smallest components and eliminated any that did not directly produce value. But Taylor understood something that modern workplace designers seem to have forgotten. He wrote in Chapter 3 that the workman is not a machine, but a human being. And he warned that excessive supervision and unnecessary meetings waste precious labor hours. The man who invented scientific management warned against exactly the pattern that now defines most office environments. If you have ever had a manager who scheduled a meeting to plan a meeting, you have witnessed Taylor's warning come true. The difference is that Taylor could see it happening in real time because he was watching the physical motions. Today, the waste is invisible. It lives in your calendar and your notification tray. By 1922, Henry Ford had taken Taylorism to its logical extreme. In his book, My Life and Work, Ford described the moving assembly line at the River Rouge plant in Dearborn, Michigan, where the time to assemble a Model T dropped from 12.5 hours to 1.5 hours. Ford's division of labor was designed to minimize interaction. Workers performed a single task. They did not discuss it with the next person. They did not attend stand-up meetings about it. They turned a bolt, and the car moved forward. That model was incredibly efficient for repetitive physical work. But it is the exact opposite of what knowledge work requires. When your job is to solve novel problems, you need both collaboration and solitude. The system you work in provides only the first and actively penalizes the second. So, what did the collaboration model actually come from? In 1941, Mary Parker Follett's book Dynamic Administration was published posthumously. Follett was a political scientist and social worker who studied how people cooperate in organizations, and she coined the term power with to describe collaborative decision-making. Her essay, The Law of the Situation, argued that the group is the proper unit of analysis for solving complex problems. This was the intellectual birth of modern teamwork theory. Follett was not wrong. Groups can solve problems that individuals cannot, but she never claimed that every problem should be solved by a group or that collaboration should be the default state. She argued for situational awareness. Know when to collaborate and when to act alone. That nuance has been lost. The modern workplace treats collaboration as a permanent condition, not a situational tool. And this brings us to the hidden truth. Collaboration is not the enemy. The enemy is collaboration without boundaries. It is the assumption that more communication is always better. It is the open office built for real estate savings but sold as innovation. It is the meeting culture that fills every gap in your calendar because empty time feels like wasted time. The cost is invisible to the organization, but acutely felt by every individual inside it. You feel it. You feel the exhaustion after a day of back-to-back calls where you never once had time to think. You feel the guilt of closing your door or putting on headphones because you know you are supposed to be available. You feel the frustration of being evaluated on deep work while being denied the conditions required to do it. That is not a personal failing. That is a structural contradiction. And until you see it clearly, you will keep blaming yourself for failing at a game the system designed you to lose. Let's be direct about what this costs you. When Rugelberg and his team ran the numbers across their study, they found a 2.5% drop in task performance for employees who rated meetings as unproductive. That sounds small, but applied across a year of your work, it means you lose roughly 1 full week of productive output every year, not to the meeting itself, to the lingering drag of knowing the meeting was pointless. When Lapine and Zhang measured collaboration overload, they found that employees with 4 or more collaborative interactions per hour were 9% less creative, not by their own report, by standard measures of divergent thinking applied in a controlled study. You are not imagining the fact that you had fewer good ideas last quarter. You were in more collaborative interactions. The ideas were there. They just never had the uninterrupted space to surface. And when Bailenson team measured Zoom fatigue, they found that the effects of 2 hours of video meetings persisted beyond the meetings themselves. Participants who reported high fatigue also showed lower performance on cognitive tests administered 30 minutes after the calls ended. The meeting ended. The cost did not. You know this. You have closed a video call and sat staring at your screen, unable to remember what you were going to do next. Your brain was not being lazy, it was recovering. If this describes your afternoon, don't let it remain invisible. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next piece of the puzzle. The system isn't going to fix itself, but understanding it is the first step. And comment with the word recovering if you've ever felt that post-meeting fog. Let's make this visible.